We are really excited, as Erin said, to bring these 4 speakers to you. I think for all of the, 7th grade civics, when we talked about representation and, one person, one vote, and then since then as grown-ups, how frustrating it's been over the last few years, we thought it was a great chance to bring everybody together and learn about what's happening right now. We know for the past couple of years, we asked you all to help with the census to get as many people included and counted. Now the next phase begins, right? Which is how that's going to impact the redistricting, line drawing maps that are going to end up at the federal, state, county, and city level, and ultimately who we get to vote for or not, and how money gets distributed when those people make decisions, which ultimately impacts the social sector and the people that we're trying to serve. So, this is front and center right now at the very core of the work that we all do in the social sector. So we know you have a lot going on in your organizations, and we really appreciate that you're taking the time out. As Erin said, we want this to be about answering questions that you have. So when you talk about rock stars, we brought together rock stars who are right in the center of it at a time that couldn't be more important for you guys to get involved and to get the people that you represent involved. So I'm going to stop talking. We'll keep an eye on the chat to make sure that we do our best so that your questions get answered. But I'm going to turn it over to Jose Del Rio first. We're going to start with what's happening with California Common Cause. Thanks and welcome, Jose.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Regina and Erin, and thank you so much to the good folks at CNM for putting together this wonderful, wonderful panel and for putting all 4 of us together. I think this is a great opportunity. But like you mentioned, I think this is a good time to sort of frame the conversation, to understand what's going on in the state of California, what's going on here locally in Los Angeles and the greater Southern California area, as well as throughout. So as you mentioned, the 2020 census is behind us, right? The redistricting process and the redistricting season is officially in full swing. So in the coming months, we can expect new district maps to be enacted at all levels of government, including everything from congressional districts to city council districts to local water board districts. But you might be asking yourself, what is redistricting, right? Well, redistricting is just the process of creating new district maps. Every 10 years, district maps are redrawn based on federal census data, that data that you guys helped put together, to adjust for population changes. The central value guiding this process is to make sure that each of our voices, including the voices that we represent as nonprofit partners, is fairly represented at our local, state, and federal governments by creating districts with the same number of people in them. So why should you care, right? How does California draw its district lines, and how should we avoid gerrymandering, to make sure the next decade's district maps are already or accurately, reflect our diverse communities? Well, on a local level, redistricting determines whether our communities are kept together in electoral districts, enabling them to be heard in local affairs and to elect candidates who fight for their needs. Or if they're gerrymandered into different districts, diluting their voting power and their voice. The process determines how well a community's interests, are represented in government, including communities of color, low-income communities, and other communities with shared interests, views, languages, and history. So if you're part of a nonprofit that's dedicated to criminal justice reform, environmental issues, solving houselessness, providing legal aid, or any other issue under the sun, getting involved in redistricting is critical. Redistricting ultimately determines how responsive elected officials are to community needs and which communities have opportunities to sit in the halls of power, making critical decisions about water, funding, transportation, criminal justice, schools, and other issues that affect our daily lives, including the communities that the nonprofits serve. But it has its challenges. The last 18 months have really put pressure on the government and on our independent commissions. The Census Bureau's data was delayed, redistricting timelines had to be changed, primary and election dates had to be adjusted, and public participation had to be reworked and rethought. But there's good news. It's not all bad news. There's good news, there's great news, and that's what the 4 of us are here together to talk about today. We're right in the middle of the process, and there's still plenty of time for the community to get involved, including the nonprofit sector. And being here for this conversation is the very first step.
Thank you, Jose. I'm glad to know that there's plenty of opportunities for people to be involved right now and to make sure that what they care about is heard. So we're going to bring it to the LA City side now, Raphael. So bring us up to date on what's happening in LA, what the next couple of months are going to look like.
Yeah, thank you, Regina, and thank you, Aaron, and thank my colleagues here. It's so cool to be with the CNM family again, wearing this hat, and so I'm pretty excited and appreciate Jose for sort of laying out the big picture in terms of what's going on with redistricting, not just in the city of Los Angeles, but we also have to consider as Angelenos, you know, that we're also having redistricting on the school board side, on the county level, as well, you know, our sort of like funneling into the state of California. So, so in terms of the city of LA, and most of you know that in 1999, the city charter called for the creation of a city council redistricting commission, which is represented by 21 members that are appointed by city council members, the mayor, the city controller, and the city attorney. And you know, our vision in terms of the commission is really about strengthening the governance of the city of Los Angeles, right? Empowering its communities, its diverse communities to be engaged and to ensure that we have fair and inclusive representation. And the city of and in the city of Los Angeles, the structure is 15 council districts, right? So if you live in the city of Los Angeles, you live in a council district and they're represented by your council members. And one of the reasons why it's so critical to be involved here. And we have to look at this also as part of the civic engagement continuum, right? Because it calls for people to be engaged, right? To be civically engaged. You know, it's, yes, you know, it starts with, you know, getting involved in your community, you know, becoming a citizen, registering to vote, getting involved in your neighborhood councils, you know, commissions and so on. This is part of that fabric. The thing is that it doesn't happen every day. This is a, this happens every 10 years, you know, and so when you hear, well, when you try to convey the importance of redistricting, it really takes us a while to convey that because it's not an everyday thing. It's an abstract, right? So we kind of have to start where that person is in terms of, you know, what redistricting is, how it impacts your family, how it impacts you, how it impacts your community and your neighbors, right? And so that's important to recognize. But right now in the city of Los Angeles, we want to hear from Angelenos, right? Because the way that these maps are drafted by this commission, right, is basically quite a few data points, right? And as Jose mentioned earlier on, the census data is very critical. Unfortunately, we do not have that yet. You know, we're hoping to get that data in mid-August, and that's when a lot of the work is going to be happening. But census data alone is not the only factor that the commission considers. What we also consider is communities' testimonials, right? Communities being able to describe their communities, right? What makes your community? What are the nuances, right? What are your schools? What are your, you know, your places of worship? We want to know that information. We want to know, you know, who your neighbors are. You know, so for example, you know, there are communities in the East San Fernando Valley. You have a community like Pacoima, you know, that has an affinity with a Lakeview Terrace, with a, you know, with the Mission Hills or with an Arleta, right? So the community being able to come to these hearings or providing written testimony is important because that is a data point. And that's a point that this commission considers as it drafts its maps. So starting in July 1st, you know, we began holding these public hearings. We're holding them citywide. We're holding them also per council district. And, you know, we will go until mid-September with these public hearings. And we want to hear from you, right? So this is an opportunity for Angelenos to actually become engaged and share with us, you know, what your thoughts are in terms of your community. And what are your thoughts in terms of how, you know, the council districts are split right now? What are you recommending, right? Pretty soon, folks are going to be submitting maps as well. And so that's an important period. Once this public hearing period is over for the city of LA, which is going to happen in mid-September, what's going to be happening is that the commissioners are then going to be drafting these maps, right? And the drafting of these maps will be taking place publicly as well. So you have an opportunity to see commissioners in action, right? That whole period is going to take place in September, probably early October, but the goal here is to basically present draft maps to the public in early mid-October. That will provide the public, Angelenos, an opportunity to react to those maps. What you submitted, was that considered? Is there something there that you don't like? Is there something there, that you support, right? So Angelenos are going to get an opportunity to do that. We're going to be holding 4 public hearings in mid-October to hear from the community. Then the commissioners are going to go back and pretty much, just, refine it with the feedback that we got. And by actually at the end of October, the commission will submit their final maps to the city council and the mayor. And that's where a whole other process begins, where the city council will debate these maps. And, at the end of the day, and we're looking at the end of December, where the council and the mayor will adopt these maps, and they will go into effect January 1st. And so you could just imagine the impact that's going to have on elections, but again, it's not the best time frame that we have. These are the cards that we were dealt. It's truncated. We are doing our best to ensure that we get maximum engagement from all corners of the city of Los Angeles. So that's what's going on, and more than happy to provide information for folks to get the nonprofit sector engaged, because the nonprofit sector is critical here. There is so much at stake here, especially in terms of where you're situated, the communities that you serve and work with. Those are important factors. So having nonprofit leaders, having your base at these hearings on the city, the school, and the county level is going to be so critical. So thank you again very much for opening this space to have this conversation.
Thanks, Rafa. It's such a great reminder, that our region is the hardest region to count in the country during the census, right? So now I think what you're saying, both of you, is that this is a way to round out the story, right? So that as people are making decisions, the voices of citizens right now is really important to make sure that there's some relevant information to factor in that might have gotten lost in the count. So, which brings me to citizen representation in LA County. And Carolyn, well, let's talk about LA County.
Okay, thank you. And I brought a set of slides with me to provide just an overview of what's happening. And one of the things that's really different when you say what's happening at the city, what's happening at the county, is that we are a Citizens Redistricting Commission. And if you go to the next slide, what that means is we are independent of these supervisorial supervisors. We were not appointed by them. They have no input into the drawing of the maps for the 5 districts. We, in fact, our bylaws say we cannot, not only we don't have contact with the supervisors, we don't have contact with their families or their staff. So we are totally independent. And not only that, we need to hear from you, but we will draw the maps. And when we draw the maps, we submit them, we draw the final maps. They have no input. And in the past, they had a committee that provided recommendations, and the supervisors made the final decision, as is happening with the city. So this is the first for LA County, and we're pleased to be a part of this. There are 14 people representing the county in terms of ethnicity, the demographics of the county. We try to mirror those as much as possible in terms of the 14 commissioners. And again, we were not selected by the supervisors. It was a totally independent process. So if we'll look at the next slide, when I started to think about LA County, some things sort of slip our minds about how big it is. It's the largest county in the United States, 10 million people. It's 25% of the population of the state of California. It's the 3rd largest metropolitan economy in the world. In fact, the LA County budget is $36.2 billion. That's billion with a B, which means it has a budget larger than 25 states. In fact, it's the population of the county is larger than 41 states. So when we start to talk about the county, there's a lot of involvement and a lot of services that they're responsible for. Some other things just about the county, what we're seeing here is the 5 supervisorial districts. And when we talk about districts, what we want to do is make sure that the populations are relatively equal in each district. It's not about size. So if you look at supervisorial district 5, it has the same number of people as district 2, 1, or 3. It's just that the pink represents unincorporated areas and the white represents the cities. And the county of LA has 88 cities, and over 100 unincorporated areas. And something else when we start to think about the county, it has the largest sheriff department in the world. It has the largest jail in the world. All that's at Twin Towers. Twin Towers is the largest mental health facility in the country. The county sheriff department provides through what we call contract cities, not only covers the counties, but if you start to look at the white areas, the cities, they're also providing services to at least 42 contract cities. And there's also other services at the county level, like the county fire department. They have over almost 5,000 people. They provide services not just to the unincorporated areas, but to 59 contract cities as well. So we're talking about a lot of services, such as public health, public medical centers, fire protection. And where do taxes go? Taxes are paid to the county. So we're talking about a lot of things happening at the county level. So it's important to have your input. So when we talk about why does this matter? Let's look at the next slide. Raphael has already mentioned, and Jose too, what we're talking about, communities of interest. There are a number of criteria about that we have to look at when we draw the maps. And one of the most important pieces where the input that we get from you is around local communities of interest. Because what's important for us in terms of what you're telling us is how do we keep these communities which have shared interests, might be economics, it could be around services, it could be around other things, maybe the lack of services, pollution, but why is it important to keep those in one district? That's what we're looking at to hear from you, because when we draw, LA City has, I guess, 17 different supervisors. The county only has 5. So we're talking about large areas, but it's important because even when we draw the lines for the counties, what do we need to be attentive to? We've been hearing things about why certain cities need to be in the same supervisorial district. We're hearing about certain communities. We're hearing from it from an economic interest. So we're hearing it from the public, individuals, as well as nonprofit organizations. So this is the most important piece that we have. And right now, we're in the process of gathering input from you before we start to draw the maps, because we finish our process on December 15th at the county level. Our commission will be working on this through the county level. Can we go to the next slide? So how do you participate? We're doing the hearings, the same as the city and other local jurisdictions. We had 10 plans so far. They're based on, not on the supervisorial districts, but we started to group zip codes because it was easier for us to gather that data. We will hold 10 public hearings so far. We've adding about 3 more. So we're trying to make sure we're covering all areas of the county, and we're sensitive about, it's a new process for us. We're having some hybrid meetings. A lot of it has been by Zoom. We're looking at having some where people have an opportunity to come in and speak to us. And we will, once we get the information and the census data is released, we'll start to draw the maps ourselves. After the maps are drawn, we will have additional hearings to get input from the public, and then we will do a final hearing on the maps that we plan to present. What's important is that for you to stay informed, to know what's happening. We have our website is important to sign up. You'll know what's happening when our meetings, the second and fourth Wednesdays, but also we will train you on how to draw the maps. We will provide information on how you can go out and hold individual workshops, or how do you can go out and inform your communities. All that's available. If you look at, go to our website, we have a toolkit that provides additional information. It's in at least 12 languages. So we're trying to make sure that you will have what you need to go out to inform the people that you're representing in terms of your the nonprofit organizations. And I think what's really important is there's that huge area of unincorporated areas that it's important for them to be involved in this process, because as Hosea said, what's important is that the people who are elected understand the voices in their communities, the needs of their communities, and they're elected to respond to those needs. So that's why it's important for you, for us to have this particular workshop, and for you to understand and help us reach the public in terms of for us to understand what their needs are and how are we responsive. Again, we're independent. Our maps are submitted, no input from the current supervisors. So now I'll hand it back over to Aaron, I believe. No, sure.
I think I'll take it for a moment. So I'm struck by the complexities that all of you are dealing with right now. And also it seems a real opportunity for people to understand how to participate and how to effectively participate, so that the information can be used, right, in this decision-making process. So Kirk, we're going to turn it over to you now, because this is how the people can get engaged and be impactful. So Kirk, turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Regina. My name is Kirk Samuels, and I'm the Director of Civic Engagement with Community Coalition. And I'm also the convener of the People's Bloc. So the People's Bloc is a multiracial alliance of 34 organizations that are dedicated to the inclusion of everyday residents, conducting public education, and proposing solutions to the redistricting process that promote the political voice, representation, and access to resources of historically underrepresented groups. Now, these groups include different faiths and ethnicities, ranging from Asian Pacific Islanders to Latinx to Black folks. So what brings us together, or what unifies us, are three key principles. The first of which is being equity and solidarity, to use this to dismantle white supremacy. The second one is community participation. We want to ensure that we are lifting up the voices of the folks that have been traditionally not included in this process, to ensure that we're giving them a platform. And then lastly, we want to center the community building organizations in this process, as we aim to make sure that this is inclusive and equitable as possible. So really just putting a cap on that, putting a ribbon on that. Our goal for the People's Bloc is to make sure that the community is in the center of the redistricting process, and we want to make sure that this process is as comprehensive and accessible as possible to everybody. As you all know, we're facing a pandemic. A lot of folks are learning remotely, and there's this notion that community can be not wanting to be involved in the process, but we know that apathy is far from the case. Folks are just looking for a way to get plugged in. So the People's Bloc serves as a bridge between local government and community. So one of the ways we're bridging community to this process is to host these weekly workshops where we could talk about the communities of interest. This is something that we just heard a little bit earlier. So the community of interest is basically a neighborhood, a community, or a group of people who have common policy concerns, and that they will benefit from being maintained in a single district. So when we have these weekly workshops, we want to be able to bring this discussion to the community so they can understand just how this redistricting process works, and then how they can advocate to keep their communities together. So far, the People's Bloc, we've been hosting these workshops or these community discussions weekly, every Tuesday and Wednesday night for the past couple of months. And we're bringing out everyday residents like yourselves To have these community discussions, we could talk about how long they've lived in the community, why their community is important to them, and then we're showing them how we can engage with the commissioners to ensure that the district lines are drawn in a way that protect the communities that are important to us. So far, we've already drafted over 70 community of interest maps and submitted those to the different commissions to ensure that our voices are being lifted up and heard in this process. Also, another thing that we're doing is making sure that the community is the driving force behind this. We know that this isn't just a one-time ordeal where we get to show up and give testimony, but we want to make sure that we're following through the entire process, that we're seeing the release of the draft maps, and that that we're there present when the maps are finalized. This is something that's important to a lot of folks. This is a key theme that we see lifted up in these workshops when we're speaking with the different residents. Another thing that we're making sure is to make sure that that's as inclusive as possible is that we're providing interpretation. So we're hosting workshops in different languages, from Tagalog, Khmer, Spanish, English, and we are bringing everybody in and making sure that each person feels comfortable and that they're feeling heard. This is another thing. Folks can get intimidated. You know, it is an intimidating process to speak to 14 commissioners at once, calling in and, you know, using systems that you haven't used before. So we want to create a space that's a safe environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions, practice and just learn from one another. So when we get engaged in the hearing process, they feel confident that not only are they being heard, but they are being affirmed in that space. So this is what we're doing as a People's Bloc. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Regina.
Kirk, thank you so much. You know, it occurred to me with all of you guys that, you know, this is an audience of nonprofit leaders who know a lot about what's going on in their communities. So now the question becomes, how do we take what they know and get it into this process? I'm curious on two levels. Number one, you guys that are on this call, put it in the chat if there's a question, or just raise your hand and we'll make sure that we get to you. But I was curious, how do you recommend that they think about getting involved? It's attending meetings, it sounds like. And is it also then, like, are there some tips you could share about, you talked about being intimidated, Kirk, but all of you said how important it is that real stories inform the process. So I'm curious if there's anything you guys could recommend about how to get engaged, what to be prepared to talk about, and if there's any sort of things that you're hearing that seem to be really resonating for everybody right now, so that people can feel like they know what's going on.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I have the questions right. You were saying, what kind of advice would we give to folks to have these kind of discussions? The main thing I tell folks is, if you could talk about your community, or if you care about your community, then you're qualified. That's really the only prerequisite, is having a concern about your community, not wanting to see it broken apart, and doing what you can to make sure it's being kept together, and that it's being given the attention and the light that it deserves. That's really what it comes down to. This is what the entire process is about. We've seen what gerrymandering has done in the past to specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So when we see that, or we're seeing things that's going on in the community right now that folks may not be connecting the dots to. So we're seeing displacement, we're seeing gentrification, we're seeing lack of funding and development. And so when we connect those dots to the redistricting process, a light bulb goes off. So now people want to get activated. So this is why these community spaces are important, because it gives them a place to kind of ask those questions and make those connections. And then they feel a lot more confident when speaking with commissioners.
I wanted to add, at the county level, you can attend one of our meetings and make a comment. You can, if you attend a meeting and you don't want to make a public comment, don't want to be heard speaking, you can make a written comment. And even if you don't attend the meeting, you can provide written comments to us, and it's send it to our website. But what we've done is we're creating a process so that we can catalog all the comments that we've heard. We can keep them by zip code, because that's the information that we'll be using to draw maps. But you can, if you want, you can come to a meeting or any of the hearings to make a public comment, and comment on the communities of interest. But you have an option how you want to do it. And a lot of times, some people choose to be seen on screen. Some call in. We're hearing their voices, and some they're submitted. They're in writing. So it's up to you. But the process is there for you to take advantage of it.
So Steph asks the question, Carolyn, to your point, and open to anybody, is it equally powerful to submit written versus in person?
Absolutely. We know that not everyone is a public speaker. So it's critical because people still have a voice, right? And the descriptions that were laid out before in terms of describing your community, drawing your community, submitting, right, this important data to our respective commissions is so important. So no, they all get weighed the same. I would actually say, that if you're publicly providing testimony, do it in writing as well. Sometimes, when we look at the written piece, we can look at it again and make sure that we're integrating all the different pieces that is important for us, right? So I say yes, it is just as important. And for some of you, you're probably wondering, okay, so how do I put this together? And Jose can talk to this because California Common Cause has a pretty awesome template that goes through the steps of how to actually put together a community of interest. And so you may want to check that out. Check out their whole website as well as the People's Blog, because there's some really great information that will help us with this.
Thanks, Rafael. Jose, you want to jump in on that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rafael, for that plug. But he's absolutely correct. Look, part of this, and Kirk outlined it in what he was talking about a little bit earlier, part of this process is very complicated. It can be intimidating for a lot of different factors, not because of anything, malicious or anything like that, but just because speaking in public can be difficult for most folks. And speaking in front of a public panel or public official in front of other public folks can also be difficult. So to answer the question, I think that Steph posed in chat, and then I'll get to the template that Rafael mentioned. But to answer her question, I would say if you feel like you can speak in public in front of these commissions, I've heard wonderful and very powerful testimony on the city side and on the county side and throughout California as well. I think it really does make an impact. But I'll let the Director Gonzalez and Co-Chair Williams attest to this as well a little bit after. But you definitely have the opportunity to submit things in writing even after speaking. You can go back and say that if you forgot something or if you want to add something to your testimony, or also submit it in written form, you can definitely do that. That's what it's there for. These panelists, or these commissioners, excuse me, whether it be on the city or the county side, are there to listen to you and to your communities. So make sure your voice is heard. So I'm all about redundancy. Speak if you can. Definitely write it down if you can as well. And then to Rafael's point, look, this is a complicated process. It can be a little bit difficult and overwhelming, especially in a year like we've had. So California Common Cause has actually put together a whole host of materials for CBOs, for nonprofits, and for members of the community to actually use. And I just dropped it in chat if you want to visit that website. But everything from trainings to that COI template or communities of interest template, which will help you put together your particular testimony, whether it be in writing or whether it be verbally. You can go to that website, download that information, and take your time and submit it to your commission of choice. So I'll go ahead and drop that second link for the communities of interest testimony template. Feel free to peruse it. If anybody has any questions, of course, I'm sure you can always follow up with California Common Cause, but I'll open it up for the other folks as well to respond.
Templates are so valuable. And I also know that you have an audience here. We all are used to having to make the case, for funding, for our mission. And now it's taking it into a different arena, right? To help the numbers get rounded out with the stories, right? About what's happening in communities and what will make a difference going forward. So Edie, I don't know if you're trying to ask a question. All of a sudden you popped up full screen for me. with your really pretty
I
background.
wanted to make a comment.
Okay, go for it.
Is it okay if I make a comment now?
Go for it.
Can you
Absolutely.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
My name
Thank you
is
for
Eddie
the
Mae
three
Williams.
colors. I love your background.
Okay. I'm listening to the comments everybody's making, and my heart, my concern are for the people in the community, for those who are uninformed and just sort of sit back and allow things to happen without really understanding the value of their input. So that's the population I'm trying to reach, is to encourage them to understand how important it is that their voice is. And being quiet means that you're telling people it's okay to do what they choose to do, even though you may not want that to happen. So I'm trying to reach that population that is really uninformed, that have a voice but don't realize the value of it. And I wanted to say to Kurt, I am a founding member of the Community Coalition. I helped to establish the Community Coalition. I just want to say that.
You have to be of the making. My gosh, and you helped get it started.
Royalty.
Yeah, many blessings there. You know what, Miss Williams is totally right. You know, as I said earlier on, redistricting is an abstract. It is part of our civic engagement continuum, right? And you know, there are people who get redistricting, and they're going to turn out to these meetings. There's no need to provide education there. All we need to do is just provide them the logistics, right? The Zoom number. They're there, right? And they're voicing. They're talking about, you know, their interest and why their districts should stay this way, or why they want to go over here now. But there are so many other communities, right? So many other communities that are just as engaged, but redistricting is not part of that everyday vocabulary. It's not part of that everyday action, because it takes place every 10 years. Now, that's not saying that we should not go there. We need to go into these communities. We need to provide that education. As Kurt said, we need to tie it to all these other issues that exist for people on a daily basis, whether it's gentrification, whether it's issues of poverty. It needs to be connected, because once it's connected, people will understand it. The challenging part right now, and I equate this to, you know, registering voters during an election, is that we're having to go out there and do this education while this process is underway. And you know, we're right in the thick of it. You know, so to do the education and get people to turn out to this hearing, you know, it's a piece of work, you know, but we still have to do it, right? And while, you know, the hearings that we're hosting in LA and in the county and throughout, you know, is one way of staying engaged. The reality is that these are just the commissions. At least in the city of LA, this is the first round, because people will then have an opportunity to continue their engagement, to voice their power when the city council gets it to their place, right? So I hope that people also understand that these hearings, that the reaction to draft maps is only a piece of the overall picture that is redistricting. The redistricting process, it's pretty large, right? So this all ends for most of us at the end of December, you know, so we need to continue doing the education right now during the hearings and even afterwards, because that is what we need to do. And in essence, you know, I'm telling some folks, in essence, you know, we're almost, I feel like there's parts of me that's preparing a constituency for 2030.
I wanted to add, when we talk about redistricting, we're talking about the people in the county, at the city. It's not just voters. When we talk about what the census counts people. We draw county lines, city lines when we're redistricting to talk about the number of people in a district. And the impact starts to move up when people are voting. But when we talk about communities of interest, that's not about voters. So it's how do we reach the people whose voices need to be heard? And I think what I've heard at our meetings, our commission meetings, is that it's nonprofit organizations like those who are here, who are representing those folks. And for us as a commission, we're also trying to provide opportunities so that if folks don't have access to a Wi-Fi or be able to call, we are going out in those communities that are not that connected to provide what we're calling hybrid meetings, so they can come to the meetings and have their voices heard. And I just want to add, even someone talked about when you don't have to speak, because you only get from 1 to 3 minutes when you're speaking. We have people who speak and who then provide 17 pages of written documentation. So just think about that. And you don't have to have good English. You don't have, we just want to hear from people. And again, it's not about just voters. It's about the people in the communities, because that's who we are looking at, the electors to be responsive to, not just voters, but the people.
And yeah, I just had a real quick response to Miss May Williams, and thank you so much for sharing your comment. Always love to see original Coco in the house. Yeah, but just to echo everybody, I think if I'm just talking to friends and family, it's just simplified messaging. This is our opportunity to shape California. This is our opportunity to shape our community. That's what it is. And then another one I like to say is, like, this is a huge shift of power. The second largest shift of power in the United States, some could even argue the first, is redistricting. Next to the Oval Office and the changing of administrations, and it happens once every 10 years, like Commissioner Williams just said. So we're talking about us. This is a process that's been going on for hundreds of years, and now we finally get input on it. We don't need any special education. All we need is a concern for our community. So just let them know, like, hey, this is the ball's in your court, and you get to weigh in on this. So those are just kind of the messages I share with in my own family.
Well, Kirk, that's a nice segue. I was going to ask the question, for so many, I would imagine it's kind of a discouraging time, right? That there's a lot of big hills to climb. And, what you guys have been talking about is how important it is to weigh in, not to give up yet, right? That the only way to change things is to speak up. And that, are you finding, I'm curious with you guys, like, how you got people to show up, to submit, because for the nonprofit leaders that we're talking to today, they need to be the messengers to all those guys at church, at the grocery store, right? That says, don't complain to me, talk to those guys, right? It seems like there's a chance to sort of get your story in the hands of people that can make decisions that are either going to help or hurt, right? So I'm just curious what would make a difference, or if you have any thoughts on ways to make this work better.
I can start us off. I'm a community organizer by trade and by heart. So one of the first things that I always lean on is personal stories. Taking an issue like redistricting and sort of making it a personal issue. How does it affect me? How does it affect my family? How does it affect my loved ones? And how does it affect my community? Right? It's sort of what Kirk was saying in terms of simplifying the message, but identifying folks that are interested in getting involved in redistricting and sort of identifying how it affects them on a much more personal basis. So one of the things that we do in our trainings, and I know Coco does something similar in the People's Block as well, many of the other good government organizations not here today, but one of the things that we start off our presentations with and our trainings with is sort of making it real. We give real life examples of how redistricting could have assisted a community in crisis. We give real life examples of how a community was able to overcome gerrymandering and sort of get their voice or their seat at the table and ensure that the public representatives were responsive to them. And I think that's sort of the first step, identifying how this affects your community in this case being your membership, the communities you work with, the communities you're a part of, understanding how it affects them, and understanding that redistricting truly is the gateway to everything else. It's the foundation or the root from which all other issues emanate from.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Curious, go for it.
Yeah, I would say, in regards to build on what Jose just said, and the question of, well, how are we engaging folks? How are we letting folks know about this? What can the nonprofit sector do? This is all hands on deck. My job with the commission is to, go out there and engage, organizations and other stakeholders in ensuring that this information is going out to our community. There's a lot at stake for nonprofits here. I know many nonprofits have relationships with council people and other elected officials, right? And I know that there are also many nonprofits that are power building, right? They're organizing and they want to yield more power. But when you're in a situation where you don't have, your base or the people that you serve all in one district, or they're spread out, where it's really hard to, really convey to a council person, your needs and your agenda, there's a problem with that. And so, engaging the nonprofits in that, because I mean, at the end of the day, the nonprofits are serving our community, right? A diverse community. And so, right now we're asking nonprofits, come to these hearings, provide written testimony, because that is critical. Commissioners are going to listen to that, right? And in the case of Los Angeles, I want to share this. These are, our upcoming hearings. We actually have one tomorrow, Saturday. It's our first Saturday session. It's going to be in CD6, which is the district in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, areas like Panorama City, Van Nuys, and it's going to be at 10 o'clock. And these are the remaining hearings that we're going to have. So we urge you to participate. Go to these hearings. They're all virtual. I actually thought at one point back in May that we were going to do a hybrid, but it just doesn't seem, and we haven't gotten any direction from the city. But we want to make sure that people attend these sessions. All our sessions are in Spanish. They're being interpreted in Spanish. And upon request, other languages are available. Last night, we were in Council District 13, which is, communities like Echo Park and historic Filipino Town and Koreatown. And, we provided a Korean translation because it was requested. But we really need folks to attend these sessions. The nonprofit sector, believe me, there's a lot of influence there, and we're looking to you and looking to you to also engage your respective bases.
I want to add to what's been said about getting people engaged. You can request someone from our commission to come out and make presentations. The first presentation I made early on, I think it was the beginning of maybe April or the end of March, was to a group of churches. There were over 138 people involved from different church denominations, because they wanted to know, how does redistricting impact them and the communities that they serve? So if there's lots of information available. Raphael mentioned their meetings, their hearings that are being held. We've held a number. We've got one that will be an all Spanish language hearing, so that for folks, and we also provide interpretation and translations as needed. But if you are interested in having us come out to make a presentation, just contact us. And I think I'll put up our website address there for you. But we want to make sure, if you getting the word, you want to get the word out, we're there to support you in doing that. And again, we have materials there for you. We have kits available. We have at least 12 different languages, and we will translate. We'll provide translation services as needed. We will train you on how to draw maps, how to submit maps, and just make sure that you're involved. So just contact us if you have any questions too.
And I just dropped the county's website into chat as well.
Thank you.
So one thing it sounds like is just get the word out that there's a lot of different ways to participate, right? In writing, in person, that there are, so for nonprofit leaders, number one, it sounds like the message from you all is weigh in, representing the people that you're serving, but to encourage everyone that will listen that your voice matters right now, and that the next 4 months is really critical. And that there's different ways to get involved. High touch, not so high touch, put it in writing, ways to revisit, and that to have speakers come and be a resource if that helps, right? So I'm so grateful to all of you for, I was curious if there was any sort of last thoughts you want to share before we let everybody go back to work. But I'm just grateful that you're taking on these big projects. It is so meaningful at a time when so much is going on that's on the line. And there also seems to be some real interest in making sure that the voices of the people get factored in with some real momentum right now. So real grateful that we're in Southern California where some of this is going on.
Absolutely. And if I could just add to that, and I guess I'd start off with thank you so much to the folks at CNM for having us here today. I was just going to say, I think the underlying thread that kind of connects myself, Rafael, Co-Chair Williams, and Kirk Samuels of COCO and the People's Block is that we're all about making this process easier and more accessible. We want to get out there to the communities, especially those communities that may have difficulties participating in this process, and we want to make it as easy as possible. So I won't speak for my panel, my co-panelists, but I'll say that Common Cause is a resource to the community, to CBOs, to nonprofits. We've done so many trainings, recordings, et cetera, on our website that breaks everything down. And we're dedicating full modules to nonprofits as well and CBOs. So there's full trainings for staff, volunteers, et cetera. But thank you so much for having us be a part of this Lunch and Learn.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
I too want to thank CNM and the entire CNM team and all of you who took time today during your lunch to, learn a little bit more about what's happening in Los Angeles with redistricting. I would say, as you consider redistricting, so critical to frame it as part of the overall civic engagement process. This is something that we're going to have to include it as part of that curriculum, especially for CBOs that are doing work around civic engagement. It's so many different things. Redistricting is another aspect of it. So let's include that so that we're ready next time. Because the reality is that if we're not drawing the lines here, someone else is doing that. And I don't want anyone to make that decision for me. I want to be there. If I'm not at the table, like Shirley Chisholm said, I'm going to bring a folding chair and make it happen. So again, thank you all and my fellow panelists for the incredible work that you all do.
And I just want to echo that. And again, thank CNM and Regina and the fellow panelists for bringing this information out there. And one of the things to remember about redistricting, it only happens once every 10 years. This is your opportunity to have your voices heard, not to complain after the fact, but to come in and let us know what's important to you right now. Because the lines that are drawn are in place for 10 years. It will happen again in 2031. So let's get involved now. And I also want to thank a shout out to all the nonprofits who are out there getting involved. We hear a lot from nonprofits in our commission meetings. We hear from different civic engagement organizations, and we hear from community organizers who are out there representing their constituents. So thank you everyone for being interested and involved and for participating.
And I will say thank you, Center for Nonprofit Management, for hosting this. Thank you to all my panelists for sharing all this great information with the community as well. I think all I would add is just, I would just ask each person to commit to telling 2 people about redistricting and commit to calling into the Redistricting Commission public hearings.
That is a perfect way to end, Kirk. Thank you so much. I think Ms. Williams would support, action is the way to go right now. So thank you all for the resources, for the inspiration, and for the dates. So we know when we have to get in the game. So thank you all, really appreciate it. We know you've got to get back to work and there's plenty to do, but thanks so much for sharing. So you have access to all the links. We'll put it on our site. We'll make sure that we send it out so everybody gets it again, make it really easy to distribute. So thank you all. And to my board members, Carolyn and Raphael, you guys always show up and thank you so much. So grateful. So thanks to the panelists. You guys have a good Friday.